My name is Mary Ellen Atkins. My family on my mother's side came to Newport. Her paternal great-grandfather, Daniel Harrington, was an Irish stonemason. He was born in 1824, and he came here 1840, so he was about 16 years old. And he worked on Fort Adams and also helped to build St. Mary's Church. He married Bridget Hurley, who was also from Ireland. They had 11 children, of which 9 survived to adulthood. And my great-grandfather, which would be Philip Harrington, he was a carpenter. But family lore, of which my mother, my grandmother, everybody said he was a postman, and he had the Ocean Drive route and a horse and buggy. He married Elizabeth Smith, who was born in Ireland but came to the United States when she was about 6 months old. So Philip Harrington was the first generation to be born here in the United States. They had, I think it was 9 children, of which only 3 survived to adulthood, one of which would have been my grandmother, and her name was Elizabeth Mary Harrington. Daniel Harrington, besides the fact that he was a stonemason, he also kept cows on Bellevue Avenue. Philip Harrington, the postman, built a house in 1898 on Spring Street. But when I looked in the 1880 census, I noticed that he lived at 13 Holland Street. And it appeared from the census that he lived with his parents, his wife, his 2 very younger siblings, and his sister and his sister's husband were all listed at 13 Holland Street. So it was the family all lived in the same house. My maternal grandmother, Elizabeth Mary Harrington, married John Francis Sullivan. And John Francis Sullivan would be my paternal grandfather. His line coming to Newport was that his grandfather, Cornelius Sullivan, took a job with the New England Steamship Line. He married a Mary Ellen Harrington. He and his wife and 3 children walked from Fall River to Newport with all their worldly possessions. I have a note that my cousin wrote from my Aunt Peggy, she would be my great aunt, that said her mother walked from Fall River with her family, and she was 7 years old. They stayed with a family called the Letty family on Kilbourne Court until they got a house on Washington Street near the boats, and they lived at 81 Washington Street. She married Jeremiah Sullivan. Jeremiah Sullivan came here from St. John's, New Brunswick, and he was a boilermaker who had a job at the New England Steamship Company. One of Cornelius's sons was Henry Sullivan, and they thought he was on the battleship Maine when it was blown up in Havana, in Cuba, in the Havana harbor there. But he had been transferred off. So everybody thought he had passed away in the explosion, but they got a letter shortly later saying, no, he had been transferred to another ship, but he was in the harbor at the time of that. Another brother, Florence Sullivan, who was one of the ones that came here with his parents from Fall River, started out as a rivet boy in the summers at the New England Steamship Company, and he rose to be general foreman at the New England Steamship Company. And he married a woman named Mary Burke. They had 4 daughters, and they lived at 5 Mount Vernon Street. And the 5 daughters were referred to in town as the educated Sullivans. My Grandpa Jack was called Ranger Jack Sullivan, and my mother told me many times he was called Ranger because he played for a semi-professional ball team called the Rangers. So Everett Woods is my dad. He and my mom had 7 children. My oldest sister Jeannie, who is deceased, myself, then there's 3 boys, and then 2 more girls. I was a chemistry major and a math minor. I always say that I went into teaching. I always wanted to teach. I always say I learned how to teach by watching my father, because my father taught Red Cross swimming for the American Red Cross for over 40 years. He taught mostly senior life saving, and I watched him teach. And it's interesting because all the girls in our family all ended up being